Hello and welcome to Legalese. My name is Vincent Perryman and I am a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Legalese focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show covers tax preparation. With us now is CPA Gus Wilson. Gus, thanks for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
Now, the big question that always comes up during tax season is why do I need a preparer? Can't I just get some software and do my return myself, or either sit down and do the calculations by hand?
You're definitely more than welcome to, and some of that prepackaged software is relatively inexpensive. However, not to scare anyone, but there are various laws, changes. I think in 2008 there were 300 changes to the tax code. It's very, very complex and very confusing, and the more pieces of paper you get from the IRS or from external sources, the more complex it gets. Having a third party in your corner as your advocate is really a smart move. It really helps, it's a very stressful time to do taxes, especially if you've got anything unusual, if you're a partnership, if you own a business, if you start a business, if you had any lifestyle changes. Preparing a tax return is just something that's, it gets more and more difficult as you age and as you become more complex in your business dealings. It's always good to have an advocate or someone in your corner to go to bat for you.
Okay. And I mean, as far as, I guess, what you're paying for when you're paying a professional to do your taxes, I mean, I guess that's their specialized advice. And I mean, what have they gone through as far as to get that specialized advice?
All right, well, let me just say, too, that most of the time what you're paying for when you go to certain levels of tax preparers is their expertise, their advice, and their knowledge of the tax law. If you do buy a prepackaged software, what you're paying for is the software. And most of the time, if you go to a local type franchise, you're paying for someone just to process a return, which is not to say a relatively simple task, but you don't go to them for deep, complex issues. There's a few different types of categories of tax preparers, starting with the ones I just mentioned, the franchisees. You're talking about your big tax preparers or your smaller ones. You see the guys on the street corners this time of year with the Statue of Liberty signs and places like that. What those places tend to offer is a basic service. They offer a means to prepare your tax return. You probably would not want to go to them for complex legal or tax advice. They sometimes will have CPAs or enrolled agents on their payroll, but you probably have to get lucky to get one of them. Which leads me to the next group, which is enrolled agents. Enrolled agents, I don't have too much experience with, but they have to take a very comprehensive test administered by the IRS, as well as a background check. And so they've been thoroughly checked out by the IRS. And they actually are kind of go-to people if you need help resolving some more complex tax issues. So they're actually a good source of people to go to. Then the next category would be the lawyers. Lawyers, no offense to you, are kind of cost prohibitive. And what I've seen in my experience is that lawyers, when they're preparing a return, are usually preparing it in conjunction with some additional legal work. Either the person has had some tax controversy, or there's estates or trust or some estate planning or something along that lines where it would lead the lawyer to need to prepare the return. And lawyers far and away have deep knowledge of the tax code, and they really do know what they're doing. But once again, there is a price issue involved. Which leads me to the final group, which is the CPA or the tax accountant. I really feel like you would get your most bang for your buck with a CPA. What you're going to for them is really professional knowledge. They have a deep and intimate knowledge of the tax code. They work with the tax rules year-round, not just February, March, and April. So they are inherently aware of all the risks, all the pitfalls, all the new changes, all the new rules, and they have the resources and ability to back up anything that you would put on your return. Okay.
Well, and given that we now know who the preparers are out there, how do we go about finding a competent preparer?
The single best source to find someone to prepare your return, if you've reached the point that you've decided that you do need a tax return prepared by a third party, is word of mouth. Really, if you poll your friends and your peer group, maybe business associates, That is the single most best selling point for finding a good accountant. Really, what you'll expect to see is that you can find people advertised on the internet, or you can see advertisements. You can see businesses as you drive by, but really the best thing to do is find someone who knows someone, find a referral, find someone that you're comfortable with. And one thing to add to that is that you're probably not doing yourself a favor by going to your boss and asking him who he uses for an accountant. Different needs for different people. So your peer group is probably the best people to poll for such a thing. There are some pitfalls. Once you do select accountant, don't just go blindly into it. There are probably a few questions that you'd want to ask, or get a general feeling for the place as you walk in. And there's a couple situations where I would just run the completely opposite direction if I walked in, and that's if these places offer huge returns without ever actually looking at your stuff. That sounds like a bad situation. And also the places that offer seemingly bogus tax rebates. I've heard a lot of stuff on the internet about Obama stimulus checks for $12,000 in slave reparations. And the rule of thumb there is if it's too good to be true, it is too good to be true. There's no such thing as either of those things. So really get a good feel for the place as you enter, and make sure that you're not going with someone shady.
Okay. So, and with that, I guess, we see a lot of these advertisements this time of year where they promise that they'll just go ahead and give you the refund once they've finished your taxes before the government's actually turned it over to them. And with that, is that a legitimate practice, or is that questionable?
It is a legitimate practice. I think what we're talking about is the rapid access loans, or whatever the franchisee tends to call them. What they've offered is a way to instantly get your refund for a fee. But what you'll find is that what they're doing is taking advantage of you. That fee, if you do the math, usually ends up being quite a bit interest-wise on your refund. And these guys, what they're doing really is they're e-filing your return and asking for a direct deposit back, which by federal law has to be done within 5 to 10 business days. So really you're paying a exorbitant fee for something that you could have in your bank account with no fees in 2 weeks.
Okay. When we return, we'll continue our discussion about tax preparation. Please stay with us.